We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live.
Drop the mic with Jason Hunt.
All right, Dr. Jeremy Weisz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely. I think a good starting point for us in this conversation today is to dive into podcasting itself, because I mean, really, you've been doing it for ages. I thought I was doing it for ages. I'm on episode 215 here. Yet, how many episodes are you at?
Over 1,000. I stopped counting. I mean, there's probably a way to count, but yeah.
Over 1,000 podcast episodes, and through that time of the 1,000 conversations, 1,000 people you've actually got to know and meet, and through those thousands of conversations, what do you think is the one biggest advantage or biggest opportunity from those thousands of conversations?
I mean, the thing is, I look at, we can call this mentorship, whether it's a book, a resource, or a podcast episode, and it's a shortcut, right? Like, I could ask you, like, what is your favorite software? What's your favorite book? And from a selfish perspective, I can ask all the questions I want to know. Like someone was mentioning, and I'll go out like right after and I'll just buy the book, right? And so I get a lot of shortcuts of people who have, basically been in business for 10, 20, 30 years, built companies of multi-million. Even I've had companies who have sold for billions of dollars on, and learning their big lesson is a shortcut. Like it took them 30 years trial by fire to learn a couple key lessons. And so I could ask them that. And so, for example, someone, we were talking about books and we were talking about systems and bottlenecks. And one person's like, yeah, like I just try and identify bottlenecks in my business. That's been like the biggest thing. And then a while ago, someone recommended The Goal by Eli Goldratt. And so I'm like, cool, I got The Goal. Awesome. Then I was on with someone else and they go, and I mentioned we were talking about it on the podcast, The Goal, actually the co-author wrote another book called Velocity. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And so I went out and got that book. And so just, it leaves me, when you start to pull the string and it leads down this path, I feel like it's leading me to lessons and resources that I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. It helps me in my business and my life. So it's definitely a shortcut.
100%. I mean, and you hit the nail on the head there, where I think you said, the point around just selfishly taking advantage of that opportunity to talk one-on-one with, whether it's a coach that charges hundreds an hour for their services, but you get to get that one-on-one time in a podcast setting and your entire audience gets to benefit from it. But really, you get to ask the questions, which is a huge plus.
Yeah, like one of my favorite books, Never Split the Difference. And, I don't know if you've heard of it, Chris Voss, he was an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. And some people get it for business negotiation reasons. The reason I got it was from parenting reasons. Sometimes I feel like when I'm communicating with my kids and negotiating, I'm not going to say it's like a terrorist situation, but like he had to negotiate with terrorists to get hostages. I'm like, how do I get my child out the door when they don't want to put their coat on or when they don't want to do something, which happens, daily, they don't want to do something. So that's actually why I read the book and got it. And then I was able to have Chris on and ask him all the questions that I had, like you said, and he has some amazing stories in that book, but just firsthand curiosities I have after reading the book.
I think that's the key, right? To be a strong podcaster, you need to be curious.
100%. No doubt.
From inception, when you started your first episode to episode 1,000, what's one of the prevailing things that stands out as something that you've learned, that you've done so dramatically different from the first episode to episode 1,000?
I think it's more of a mindset thing. What I learned is, because I've also, our company helps people launch podcasts. And so I'm helping people too. Early on, we've had some big name people and companies on shows that we helped. And at first I was really intimidated by that. And what I learned is these people are just people. You know what I mean? No matter how successful they are, they have faults, they have challenges. And, I remember I had the founder of Atari on, Nolan Bushnell, who was Steve Jobs' mentor. And don't get me wrong, like I still get nervous for interviews, but I was like, holy cow, like he was the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. But through talking to him and hearing his journey, he's like, yeah, Jeremy, at one point we were left with nothing and in the journey. And we told our kids we were going on a trip around the world. And the reason they did that is they were going to stay with different people in different legs. Like if they went to, I don't remember where he said London, they have friends, they'd stay with London. So it was almost like I don't remember if he said they couldn't afford the house at the time, but that's why they did it, because things weren't going well at that time. And so I was like, holy cow, like you think this person has figured it out, they have it all, and they're just like, not like everyone else because they've created successful companies, but just they have challenges like everyone else and issues. So I just realized, I get less intimidated by people because, they have faults and challenges like everyone else. And it's really a mindset thing. It's the imposter syndrome thing. And that sticks in my mind.
It's funny you say that, because I had a similar experience. We had Edward Zuckerberg on our podcast. This is Mark Zuckerberg's father.
Oh, really?
He's
What's his profession? Was he a dentist or something?
Yes,
a dentist,
he's a dentist, and he specializes in dental marketing, which is why we wanted to have him on our show.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
But during that, like, if you listen to the episode, like I'm like, I listened back to it, I'm like starstruck, you know what I mean? It's just like, the typical dialogue in the podcast is really a back and forth conversation, but that was him talking 95% of the time, and mind you,
does he still work? Does he still do dental marketing? Do you know?
You know what? He does. His dental practice was the very first ever business that did the check-in function on Facebook. Mark tested.
He's got all the cool, like, new features that no one else gets access to.
Right. And so he was like the guinea pig, his business, for all the new improvements that Facebook was launching back in like 2007. Right. So, which was interesting, but that specific episode was geared towards dental marketing. So naturally, obviously, I'm sure he's benefited from a lot of the perks from Facebook advertising has to offer over the years. Right. But now he's a speaker for dentists. So if you're a dental practice owner, Edward Zuckerberg, which is,
I recognize the last name, not the first, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, of course. So, but true. I mean, it's a good point, right? It's like after having these conversations, you realize we all have the same flaws. We all have flaws. We all have differences, and really, it says is nothing that should intimidate you by episode 1000, right? By any means, or have an inferiority.
It still does, but I have to remember those stories in my own head.
Yeah, exactly. So, so in terms of for the Inspired Insider podcast, is there a specific niche that you went down, or did you play with the idea of niching it? Because it appeals to entrepreneurs, right?
That's a great question. And originally when I started, I thought, Jason, I was going to have the foremost podcast on productivity in the world. That's what I thought in my mind. Okay. I luckily did not name it that. So I do tell people, when you name a show, just be careful. And we did a whole episode on the biggest mistakes people make when naming their podcast. And one of them is maybe pigeonholing yourself too much. So luckily I did not name it the Top Productivity Podcast, because what happened after about 5 episodes, and I don't remember the time when the 4-Hour Work Week came out with Tim Ferriss, but there was like a lot of talk on productivity. So I had like 5 people on. And after the 5th one, I was like, wow, they're saying almost the exact same things, which is cool. Like I could see patterns, but I'm thinking, my God, if I did 100 more of these, I would be bored. Right. And so I've definitely branched out. But I was at that point, top productivity experts. So it's also, so I've had a top agency series, as you know, you've been on. It was an amazing episode. I've had SaaS founders on, e-commerce founders on. And also for me, it's what do I want to learn, right? So if I am really interested in the sales process, I'll go out and find the top people for sales. And so I had Ali Mirza on, who basically has helped scale sales teams, helps train sales teams. And we had an intimate personal conversation. He was pretty blunt, like if you can imagine someone who trains sales teams. He was fantastic, but it goes into what am I interested in learning right now for my life or my business? I did a top, we were talking about health stuff before we hit record. I did a top, so I geek out on health stuff because my background's in biochemistry and as a chiropractor. I had a top health and longevity series because I was like, listen, if we don't have our health, we have nothing. And so I went and sought out some of the top health experts who are longevity experts. Like, what are people doing? If anyone's like listening to this, have listened or read the blue zones, right? The blue zones is like the zones in the world that are people on average are more likely to live to over 100 or more. And so I remember I was watching a Netflix documentary on health and longevity. And as I'm watching it, I emailed the two people who were featured in it, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? And both of them said yes. And I ended up having them on.
Who are
But
those people?
one was Aubrey DeGray, and I'm blanking on the other person's name. He was a cancer researcher who basically was then cancer and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's research, and was shifting the same stuff. And how does he use those same methodologies for longevity as opposed to sickness? So I'll have to find out the guy's name. He was like a ultra marathoner too. But
Yeah,
that was an interesting episode.
I was at a conference in Cannes, France, years back, and I recall a speaker was speaking specifically to the blue zones. It might have been one of those two names that you mentioned there, but I find that very interesting. But it makes sense. Like Okinawa, Japan was one of the 7.
There was a Costa Rica one. There was one in the U.S. and California. There was one in Greece. There was one in Italy. It's a really interesting book, and I think he came out with the second book too.
I think one of the prevailing factors for longevity, was it not community? The emphasis on community.
That was one of them. It was actually, the guy's name was Dr. Bill Andrews, who I had on, and we talked about immortality and ultra marathons. But yeah, it was community. Community was one aspect. It wasn't just, people think, just specific diet and exercise, because there was a case example in the Italy one where they're talking about like a sheep herder. I don't know if you remember that, and how obviously they walked, who knows, like marathons a day, but their diet was like a loaf of bread, a huge thing of cheese, and a bottle of wine. So like, if you look at that person's diet, like, all I need to do is eat a loaf of bread, a wheel of cheese, and a bottle of wine every day, I'll be healthy. Like, that's not the case.
I can do that every day. I do it every day.
Right. So, but yeah, there were a lot of factors there. One of the factors that sticks out, I remember, and I still do, I don't remember which of the books he talked about it. He's like, out of all the things from a food perspective, he said, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he said a handful of nuts a day helps with longevity. So I'm like, okay, I remember that. I keep a jar of almonds in the kitchen, and every day I just take a handful, and I try and get my family to take a handful too. So
boom, one more year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So in terms of podcasting, here we are in present day. It's some may say it's a bit of a saturated market. What's saturated really is there's a lot of podcasts out there, and there's only so much time in a day to consume podcasts. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you see it as saturated, or do you see it as a kind of a bottomless well?
I love when people say that, actually, because there's less competition for people and my clients. Like, okay, it's saturated. The way I think of it, Jason, is like, it's like saying a website space is saturated. Well, like, if you have a company, you have a website. I don't care if you're a dental office. Well, the dental website space is saturated. Well, no, if you have a dentist office or whatever business, you have a website. And so that's the way I feel about a podcast right now. I'll say this: when we work with companies, we're not working with comedy podcasts, true crime podcasts, sports podcasts. So I am specifically talking from a B2B business space. And from a B2B business space, we have clients in, like I said, the software, the agency space, HVAC, blue collar space, pest control, financial services. If you have a company that serves HVAC and you get 2 million downloads, it doesn't matter for your business. Like if you serve blue collar HVAC companies, okay, you care about those people seeing it. So it's obviously serving a very specific niche, content in a specific niche. And for a B2B business, you only need 50 to 100 people in that niche who are authorities and leaders that you're connected with, right? And so it doesn't take a lot. You don't need millions of downloads or even thousands of downloads. I know people who have literally 100 people maybe listening, and they make millions of dollars from their podcast, right? So saturated is like you mentioned from a professional development standpoint, from a content standpoint, all this stuff, content standpoint, from a relationship standpoint alone, it's worth doing it because that's how we connected, right? And I don't look at a podcast as, there are the, referral partnerships you can form. There's clients, you form client relationships, you can form, obviously content, professional development. But the funny thing is when I have someone on my show, the way I look at it, and you've experienced this a little bit, my goal is not to get them as a referral partner. My goal is not to get them as a client. My goal is to give to them as much as possible and actually to introduce them to people and actually get them a partner and get them a client. That's actually my goal. Because if I go, Jason, and I introduce you to referral partners and clients, like, wow, this person cares and he's giver, and
How can I give back?
We have a relationship.
Yeah.
That's it. And I don't even expect anything in return, but that's the way I think of it. And it's a giver mentality, but from a saturation perspective, keep thinking that's cool. Other people will start it, and they'll form some amazing relationships.
My thought on that is that I don't think it's saturating as much as some people might think. Yeah, there's a lot of podcasts out there. Yes, everybody and their brother is creating a podcast, but just this, and this is not a political podcast, but let's just take a look at the election. Like, a lot of people are giving credit to podcasting as driver behind who won that election, right? And a lot of people are giving less and less attention to the mainstream media and more attention to podcasts that speak specifically to them.
Do you struggle coming up with new content ideas? You got to check out topicalmap.ai. Stop wasting time manually mapping topics when AI can do it for you in under just 1 minute. 1,000 plus target keywords in just one click. SEO maps, question maps, product idea maps, social first maps. Check it out, topicalmap.ai.
That's a great point. And also, a lot of podcasts start, and if you go back, they've only published 5 episodes and they haven't published anything in 4 years. So and I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say, there's X number of podcasts that start a year. They also don't continue past 5 episodes. So it may look and seem like everyone's starting a podcast, but are they continuing to do a podcast? Like you said, like I've been for over a decade, I've released, 2 or more episodes a week. So it's consistency as well.
2 or more episodes a week, that's commitment. Let's talk about how the support team you have behind you in creating your podcast. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, when I originally started, I was doing everything. Okay, big mistake. Not a good use of my time. I'm like, I'm gonna stay consistent. So it was like the night before, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't done XYZ. And what I quickly learned is I need to, and this is early on, that's why people started coming to me, for help, I put on in systems, right? And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show up and do nothing else. I want to show up, develop the relationship, foster the relationship, and run my business. So the system that I set up, and that's what we use, is what we use for our clients is, we have a dashboard. We upload that, drag the video into that dashboard, and then our team executes on the back end of everything. What that looks like you said, is there's a team who just does the audio and video, right? Some people only do audio, some people do video too. We have a writing and editing team, so it goes through the writing process, the editing process. That we have a kind of a triple checker that checks it on the website and also the content from there. We have a web development team that will actually go in and post it on the website and across all the podcast channels. And then there's customer support team just handling any inquiries. For me, customer support was always super important. I come from the brick and mortar, from the chiropractic business. We had an actual person in person answering phones, checking people in. So, we have 22 hours a day. We have a kind of a universal inbox, and there's two people stationed, like 2 or 4 hour stints, that are answering emails 22 hours a day. And we want like less than 10-minute response times for things that come into our inbox. But all that's handled. It gets posted across on their blog as a blog post, across the social media channel. We'll create a snippet on mine. So we'll take a snippet, like when yours comes out, it will get posted, and then a month later it will have a snippet, and probably around 6 months later have a snippet. So we keep the giving cycle for Jason to like keep promoting what he's doing in his thought leadership. And that's all happening. I just get to show up, drag that file in, and then all that stuff happens.
So I'm a believer in the Pareto principle. I think that 20% of
Huge.
the effort we put into something garners 80% of the result. In all those distribution channels you talk about, what falls in that 20% of the effort but garnering 80% of the result? What is the big needle mover for you in terms of getting new listeners listening to your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about an interview show, right? Because people will promote it on their channels.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, first of all, I love that. Perry Marshall, I had on the podcast. I don't know if you've had him, but maybe you should. 80/20 Sales and Marketing, one of my favorite books. And it's the email that goes into the guests. Like, so when the episode goes live, we email the guests the info. And LinkedIn, and I've found for B2B and for us, posting and sharing stuff on LinkedIn is that 80/20. You know what I mean? And a lot of times it could be me or posting it, or it could be the guest posting it and tagging me, because they'll share it on their LinkedIn. Because listen, it's all about them. So they'll share it on their LinkedIn. I'll reshare it. I'll comment on it. I'll like it, and I'll tag other people who I think should see their stuff. And so I would go with it's not always me promoting it. It's actually the guest promoting it, but LinkedIn is a huge platform for us.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? LinkedIn, the audience on LinkedIn is on brand for you, right? Like people in the mindset of doing business and not mindlessly scrolling through social media to get onto that next hot piece of content.
Yeah, and it's business tips and advice and things like that. So that for us, that is the channel in social media that we love and we frequent.
Now, as we start embracing AI, artificial intelligence, in our businesses, in what way are you leveraging AI in the podcasting process?
So there's a lot of we did this with a client early on, and we have an episode on this, is about how do you name your podcast, right? And there's a lot of do's and don'ts. So what we've started to do is just help people a little bit with that process through AI. And it doesn't spit out a perfect answer by any means, but what maybe take weeks could take an hour at least to narrow it. And so we loaded up, literally copied everything on certain pages of their website, loaded it in, and asked like, hey, we want a podcast name that no one has, that the domain, all the stipulations that we want. Because with AI, it's all about the prompts and how good your prompts are, right? And so we wanted all those things because we don't want to like find, you've been there, like, oh, the website's taken or whatever. It's so annoying to like come up with a great one and then you go and the website's taken. So we loaded all that in there and we got a list and we said, okay, we want like 25 options. And we looked at the 25 options and none of them were good, but there were two like words that were good in there. So we took one word in this word. Okay, now we use the same prompt and go, but use the word flow in it or whatever. And then that gives us 25 with flow. And then, so it took like 3 iterations to get to, we do have to make some decisions there, but it shortcuts it. Cause like, okay, I like this and like this, and coming up with something from scratch is sometimes hard. Okay. So that has really helped a lot from like the ideation phase, from that standpoint. Also if we want ideas for writing emails, like if we're writing an email, to promote a podcast episode, we can get a very good email. Again, it's not perfect. We still have the writing editing team go through, okay, here's the email that you can use to promote the episode. So there's just a lot of ways to make it quicker, and better, but then we can refine it even more once it gets spit out.
Think about the time that's just saved from your editors are no longer copywriters, they're now editors. The amount of time that they save and how much more content, they can churn out now with the help of ChatGPT and AI doing all of the research for them.
Totally. Yeah. It helps a lot with research as well.
Yeah. I do you have the paid version of GPT?
Yep.
Yeah. So, you can, create those personalized GPTs that are experts on your podcast episodes. You can bake in the transcripts right into the GPT so it can pull whatever information you need based off every single episode you recorded. I mean, that's a daunting task to think 1,000 episode transcripts in a GPT, but it's possible, right?
It's amazing. I mean, it's going to get better and better too.
It's only going to get better and better. I truly, right now, one of the things we're doing in our business is creating, we like to call it humanized AI agents on websites that can have conversations and lead that user to a point of sale. And right now we're at a point now, it's still in its infancy. People don't expect to see an AI agent when they go to a website, but I look at it like, right now AI is kind of like social media back in 2009 and 10. You know what I mean? A lot of businesses have not fully adopted it yet. AI is there too, but eventually it's going to be the expectation.
Totally. It's going to have to be used. My daughter wrote a kid's book, and we, again, same thing with the publishing company. She had to create a publishing company to create the kid's book. And in a matter of 15 minutes, like it would have taken, I don't know, weeks. Like, I don't know. So in a matter of around 15 minutes, we had choices. She was able to kind of choose the word she wanted, and we narrowed it down, and then boom, done.
Robert Munch is in trouble.
Robert Munch?
Robert Munch, any of the Mr. books, the author, he's passed away now, but anybody that was writing children's books now in the past, any author that was writing them, how old's your daughter?
She's 10.
And getting into the children's book business is insane. But you know what? I've done the same thing myself, where I've said, hey, please write a bedtime story in the same style as Robert Munch. And I want you to include this lesson that my son might have learned today. My son had a fit on the ice because he was having trouble skating. So can you create some sort of a story with this lesson to be learned? I don't know what that lesson is. Tell me what that lesson is and put it into the book. And it was able to churn out an awesome bedtime story with images, and I can read it to him before he goes to sleep.
There's another one, as you're talking about it, reminds me, Jason, like a way to wow and delight. And it could be just friends, colleagues, partners, champions. And I was talking to a friend, eyeing garlic, and he kind of turned me on to it. And I don't know if you've seen, there's you can make a song about anything. I'm sure there's a lot of ones out there. This one specifically was Suno, And he was like, hey, Jeremy, I'm going to talk about podcasting. I'm going to talk about basketball because I play basketball and a couple other things. He asked me, well, what music? I'm like, I don't know. I like anything from rap to country, like whatever. And so he actually created a song and then put it on LinkedIn, tagged me on it, and it's pretty phenomenal. And so I did it for, so it's almost like a party trick, right?
Yeah.
And I did it for someone else and they think it's the coolest thing of all time. And it probably takes 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes to do it. And it's really professional and amazing.
The platform was called Sono. That he used?
It's Suno, like
Suno.
Suno.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. Like you could probably, if you have a good partner or client, like, hey, I wrote a song about you. Here it is. And it's amazing.
That is cool. That is cool. And you can just see, like, a lot of people say AI is taking jobs away, but it's creating a ton of jobs too. It's like, okay, great. AI can create a jingle. Well, how about finding a videography company that can create a music video to go with that jingle? Right? Like, there's so many other opportunities that can arise from these AI tools. That's why people, in my opinion, they don't need to be in fear of their job per se. Just use it as a way to create a superpower. You know what I mean?
For people, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, so moving on, I mean, talking about some of the, because you've obviously interviewed tons, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of business owners, to know what are some of the challenges that most of these business owners and entrepreneurs are facing this year. With things moving as quickly as they are, with AI, with inboxes being inundated with spam emails, there's a lot of challenges that small business owners are facing, and one of that is lead generation as well. Because of your experience of talking to these business owners, what are you seeing on the front lines?
You know, it depends on the size of the business. But a lot of times it's some of the fundamentals, which tend to be focus. And the successful ones I find focus and they turn things down and they stay within their superpower. And it just comes with the story of their journey. Like, oh, I remember it's either they've niched to a service or they've niched to a industry or both. And it's when they went too wide, didn't focus, took on things that maybe weren't their superpower, where there was kind of it just stalled them in their company and created other issues. I was talking to someone the other day and they said when they got rid of, different service lines, it helped a lot. I remember I had Tommy Mello on. Tommy Mello built his company. He is actually garage door company that he built to over $100 million. And you were talking about 80-20, right? And he's like, there were certain markets that were not profitable. And even though there was like a lot of revenue at this point in time, whatever he was talking about, they just got rid of the non-profitable markets and immediately skyrocketed the profits and the growth in the company. And so just looking at that 80-20 piece, and that was a focus on geography, like what were the most profitable centers for them, and just getting rid of the thing, even though getting rid of something or is an ego thing, right? But it's better to have profit than ego, I think. So it's a focus, and I think it's when they're focused, and it was like really focusing on 80-20 as well. Like the other one, I was talking to someone and they looked at all their clients and they were like, they evaluated the 80-20 of who's the most profitable clients for us and who we like working with. And obviously they get the best results for. And then they just went deep on that, and their company just went up and to the right, and they dropped the drag.
I think the problem is the shiny object syndrome, the bright shiny object syndrome, right? You see an opportunity there because you hear your competitors dropping a new service, so you add it to your website. Now you're just spreading your focus thin, right?
Yeah.
You're not focused on the one thing that actually generates you majority of the income. Obviously the book, The One Thing, I'm a big fan of, as I believe you are yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of business owners at least forget that, because especially in the world of AI, bright shiny object syndrome is a thing where every business owner now thinks they need to adopt every single AI tool out there to make their business more efficient, when it actually does quite the opposite.
I think it's a balance, like we have a shiny object board. So we use ClickUp. And so we have a shiny object board. So if I think John is more shiny object than me, maybe my business partner. I'll say that. And so, but we allowed to call each other out. Like, oh, this is great. Like, shiny object board. Don't even talk to me, because we'll have a separate meeting about the shiny object board, and I may do the same thing. And there's a balance, because it's like, okay, you want to stay ahead of the curve. Like, we want to stay ahead of the curve. So it's like, we can't just keep doing what we're doing, or I think we'll die. But you don't want to get distracted either. So we still have that board to evaluate which of these do we want to really test, right? And just know that it doesn't take all of our attention and focus, but we'll test these things. And we are making a conscious decision out of all these shiny objects. Maybe we'll test this one piece of this one because we want to stay ahead of the curve, for us.
Yeah, I love that. I'm stealing that idea, Jeremy. The bright shiny object board, because we have a lot of those happening. Like, it seems like every second day we have a Slack channel for management, and somebody's dropping some new AppSumo link in there. Like, try this.
That thing is addictive. Yeah.
God, lifetime deal, $79.99.
Like, we might as well just get it,
dude. Yeah, we do get it. You know how many of these apps we have that we've used like twice?
You don't even have a shiny object board. You have an AppSumo bot lifetime deal board. Yeah,
exactly. It's funny how you just have all these tools and you think it's a great deal because you're not paying a monthly fee, but you never use it anyway. It's insane.
Totally.
It's crazy. Awesome. Okay, well, you know what? I mean, Jeremy, this has been fantastic. Maybe you can lend some advice to aspiring podcasters out there, as I have not interviewed somebody as seasoned as you are with podcasting. So it'd be interesting to hear, your advice for aspiring podcasters that are thinking of getting into it. What do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people to do, and whether you podcast or like my mode is my preference is to podcast. But if you're not into that, you can also write a blog post or write a social media post. And I tell people, just keep it simple. And we focus on the strategy part. So, like, who are the people and companies that you really want to focus in on? And I would start there, because people ask, probably you too, what mic do I use? What software do you use? So we have a whole episode on Inspired Insider. Like, here's the top software and tools. Here's how you start a B2B podcast, all those things. By the way, you just need a USB mic. I use a Blue Yeti. I don't know what you, and I have an ATR 2100 over there. It's like $150 you can get on Amazon. A USB mic. You could use Zoom. We're using StreamYard. You could use anything you want. It doesn't matter. People, I feel like, overthink those things. Just look and see who is in your network that you want to give to, and have a conversation with them. Don't overcomplicate it. And these are the, some of the tools. You could literally just buy a USB mic for $100, and just, they overthink like all these details. They need everything, all their ducks in a row. I hear that a lot. I'm like, the first episode, you're going to suck compared to your 1000th episode. Like, no matter how good you are to start. So,
and you're probably going to pivot.
You just, exactly. So you just got to get started and get reps, right? That's how you get better. And you start with the people anyways. It's like, that's it.
Definitely. If our audience has any questions for you, Jeremy, how can they reach out and find you on Inspired Insider?
Yeah, they can go to inspiredinsider.com. All episodes are free, obviously, and there's a contact there. You can, go to rise25.com. My email is jeremy@rise25.com if you have questions. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So,
what's your personal favorite platform to listen to podcasts on?
The funny thing is, someone was asking me that today. I don't listen to podcasts at all on an app. I listen to everything on YouTube. Actually,
Oh.
everything on YouTube, because I like. Well, I have a video where I can speed up the video like 3 times.
Yeah.
And so I actually like in YouTube as an inborn, you could speed it up 2 times, but I have an app that helps me speed it up faster than 2. Because if I want to do research or listen to you before I have you on, I want to speed it up to like 3 times. But I love YouTube actually.
So you'll typically watch the podcast episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's interesting.
mean, some of them are audio only on there. Like there may just be like an image and there's no video. But if there's a video, I'm watching the video too.
Yeah, because that's one of the things they say. I believe it's the one thing, or 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I think it's the one thing where they say multitasking doesn't really exist. You don't really multitask.
It's like task switching.
Tasks,
From the productivity experts, the 5 initially,
That's
that
right.
kept coming up. They're like, when I was saying, "Oh, I'm a really good multitasker," I'm not really. I'm just good at switching tasks and not losing my focus on what I was doing before. So it's like more of a task switching than multitasking.
And if you think about it, when you're actually trying to get work done, a lot of people like to listen to podcasts while they work, quotes. And really, that's not really what's happening. You're not really listening to the podcast when that's happening. At least not for me. I can't do it. I'm just focused on whatever I'm doing.
I listen to books like when I'm working out, or if I'm like cleaning the kitchen or doing dishes or whatever it is. And I find, since I'm listening to like 2.5 times speed, I'm definitely not catching everything. So I may listen to it twice. And then when I realize I'm good, like it just happened to me today, I'm listening to the book for the second time and I know what they're going to say next. I'm like, okay, like I'm good with it. Right. So I absorbed it. Cause I'm like, oh, they're going to say this, this, and this. So I'm like, I'm good. So yeah, I'm not catching everything, but sometimes I have to listen to it 2 times, but it takes me less time to listen to it 2 times than someone 1 time because of the speed.
That's right. That's right. Fantastic. Awesome. Jeremy, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you, podcast listener, for checking out that episode of Drop the Mic. If you like that episode, I would love it if you went on over to your podcast platform and left us a 5-star review. And if you don't want to miss an upcoming episode of Drop the Mic, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.